Throughout the past 5 years, which is the main section of time when I started to really become invested in film, I have gone through a rather rapid and interesting molding process. Starting off with high school me, I was incredibly flabbergasted at heralded blockbuster epics such as The Dark Knight and Inception. Now don't get me wrong, I definitely believe that both of those are shining examples of what mainstream films should look like. But I had not truly delved deeper into the endless sea of choices available for me. Then 2014 came around, the year in which I got my first personal laptop, the 13-inch MacBook Air, which I still use and have to this day. In fact, it's the same machine that I am using to record the voiceover to this video for. Anyways, I decided that in the free time that I had, I would start investing myself into film, and I did. I was pretty blown away. I had always understood the artistic merit to film, yet I had never truly realized the power that it had to display such raw and purely concentrated emotion. I found films such as Nightcrawler, City of God, Short Term 12, and Bicycle Thieves that captured the essence of humanity in a way that I had never seen before. Flash forward 4 years, increase the obsession tenfold, refine the palette a tad more, throw in a bit of perversion, and you have current day me. My friend group often looks to me for film recommendations on a day-to-day basis, and on occasions, people will ask, what's your favorite genre of film? I know that they are expecting a response like horror, comedy, or drama, but my response is always life portrait. Now you may be asking yourself one of two questions. One, is this guy really that pretentious that he thinks he can make up a name for a film genre? To which I will say, maybe. Watch the rest of the video and make your assessment from there. 2, what is a life portrait film? Well, in order to accurately assess that, I've set up a couple of rules that a film needs to abide by in order to identify with the genre. Number 1, and this for me is the most important facet, the movie cannot have a message. If you look at most of the films that are presented in film school as some of the greatest pieces of cinema ever, there are some blatant messages that they are just trying to portray. Casablanca, sometimes one has to do something that will not personally benefit them, but will have a larger impact on society as a whole. Citizen Kane, is it worth getting to the top if you lose everything or everyone along the way? The first Star Wars, just the general idea of destiny. However, life portrait films have no such message, and if there is a perceived message, it is one that is developed from the viewer based on their personal experience and how they relate it to the film. Which brings us to our next point. 2. The plot is just people doing things that are not out of the realm of reason for everyday life. Since the title of the genre is life portrait, the point of these films is to capture the essence of humanity and the rawness in its nature. Therefore, films where people are doing things that are out of the ordinary, but still displaying humanity, cannot be included. 3. Now this one kinda relates to 2, as since the people and the actions have to be normal, so does the setting. If where the film takes place is something extravagant like Disneyland or a vacation resort, the humanity that that film can be attempting to display has a very good chance of being covered up by materialistic things. 4. There are no protagonists or antagonists. As it is in real life, there are no blatant mustache-twirling bad guys or altruistic good guys in these films. The goal is to capture humanity, and the ultimate truth about humans is that there are no good guys or bad guys, just people with different motivations that may conflict with each other. Everyone at the end of the day is just trying to make it to the next one, just like the characters in these films. 5. There are no pure resolutions. What I mean by that is there are no situations where everything turns out perfectly for the main character. Because the whole point of these types of films is for the characters to deal with the situation, not simply find a loophole that makes everything alright again. So now that we have the 5 main rules out of the way, let's take a brief look at some films I love that fit into this genre, and more specifically what they all have in common. And believe it or not, there is one year in particular that has an abundance of these films. One of, if not my favorite example of such a movie is Manchester by the Sea, directed by Kenneth Lonergan. When I first saw this film, I was in absolute awe of how it depicted grief in such an accurate and unbiased way, unlike many other films in its realm of drama, where there are many overblown reactions and drastic measures taken, the mood throughout the piece is very quiet and solemn. As someone who has experienced this type of grief firsthand, Manchester completely captures the essence and emotions that are felt when one loses somebody so close to them. The film takes place in Massachusetts, and everything seems like a completely natural progression. And when we come to the culmination of the film, there really is no resolution. There's no ultimate happy ending, but instead a sort of compromise, which is what actually happens when problems arise in the real world. At no point whatsoever does the film attempt to force any message on you or distract away from the pure form of storytelling occurring on screen. Ultimately, Manchester by the Sea hits every beat that I previously listed and does so in a way that makes it incredibly worthy of the Best Original Screenplay award it received at the Oscars. Thank you, Kenneth Lonergan. We salute you. Oh, and you too, John Krasinski and Matt Damon, who basically came up with the idea in the first place. No, seriously, look it up. Now on to the counterpart that I always bring up alongside Manchester when I talk about this genre, and that is released in the same year indie darling American Honey. Now, although these two have nothing to do with each other on the surface, they are actually incredibly alike. First of all, in both films, our protagonist is down and out at the beginning of the film, and when we get to the end of it, well, they're at the exact same place that they started, just with a little more experience and trauma under their belt. Although they both may have learned something from the time we see them on screen, the lesson is applicable to them only. There is no particular moral to the stories. The catalyst for both of these people learning things are things that are basically out of their control. In Manchester, there is no message for the audience to learn from Lee Chandler. There's no way to repair the situation. There's only dealing with a situation that has been handed to him. He does not come to the large realization that suddenly turns his life around. Heck, the film doesn't even end on that positive of a note. Lee just learns how to live with his demons of the past, present, and future. The same goes for American Honey. Star doesn't really come away at the end in that good of a place, but she realizes that there's no reason to worry about the future and essentially exhales, thus letting go of all the fear and tension inside of her and reaching a state of acceptance in the moment that she is at. There are a bunch of other films that do this too. Moonlight, Krisha, L'Avenir, Certain One, and Blue Jay are all examples from 2016. Last year we had Columbus, Graduation, The Lovers, After the Storm, heck, even Lady Bird, which I didn't particularly like. These films managed to make a fully scripted narrative with a budget behind it look like everyday life unfolding before the viewer's eyes, for better or for worse. Now, as my friends constantly point out in discussions, I have an incredibly cold heart when it comes to media and have never cried at a piece of it in all of my years on this planet. However, there were two moments where I got relatively close. The first comes from my first viewing of Moonlight, where Chiron and Juan are in the water with a ladder teaching the former to swim. The second would be on my first viewing of Blue Jay, during the final scene. The reason why these in particular got me so bad is that I was so immersed into a world that I was able to feel the emotions that were being portrayed on screen. If you've seen these films, you will know that neither of these scenes are the most dramatic or climaxes of the pieces, which is why I think they are perfect examples. You may be really happy when you graduate college, or incredibly sad when your brother dies. But when emotions hit the hardest are during the moments when nothing big is happening. Because that's exactly what humanity is. It's a compilation of these little moments that make our lives what they are. And as humans, we are imperfect. So we are likely to feel a wave of emotion when we are putting a casket in the grave. That would naturally be the opportune time to let it all out, right? That's what media has told us. No. It's when we are sitting alone in a section away from the rest of our family members with a glass of whiskey in our hands, thinking about how this would have been a whole lot better if the person who was buried was sitting beside us. That emotion overtakes us. It's the little things. That's why I dedicated a whole video to this. That's why films like Manchester, Moonlight, Blue Jay, and American Honey affect me in such a profound way. These are films where I can put the commercial wasteland that we are all living in aside and experience a little slice of something that reminds me why I love living the life that I am. And even though it's only a couple hours in the grand scheme of things, it's the little things that count the most.